An air force is a symbol of standing in the modern world, and air power is an essential element in a state's ability to make war. These high-performance fighters are Kafirs, the home-produced aircraft of the Israeli Air Force. Over the last 30 years, that air force has won a formidable reputation in air-to-air combat. Its units are equally skilled in the direct support of Israeli soldiers on the ground, skills which were amply demonstrated against the Egyptians in 1967. This is Beersheva, in the Negev Desert in southern Israel. And these are some of the fighters and bombers that took part in those 3 devastating hours that annihilated the Arab air forces and paved the way to an Israeli victory in 1967. Air power effectively won the Six-Day War. But in the long history of warfare, the pilot is a comparative newcomer. It's 75 years since soldiers took to the air, and less than 50 since they made their presence felt on the battlefield. Now, aircraft are a crucial element in any modern army. The pilot is the most highly trained of all modern fighting men, and his role is that of single combat, to pit his skills against another man-at-arms in the battlefield of the sky.
Only thing that you hear is a lot of noise that comes from your earphones, the commanding of the whole controlling net that are in the air. You don't hear the shooting. Maybe you can hear your shooting, your strafing of your cannon, but you don't hear the hits. You don't hear the shouts. You don't see the face, and you don't see the blood of the enemy in front of you. And you are up above, very far away, and you can keep yourself very far away from the battle.
But some airmen, like the crews of these German Stuka dive bombers of the Second World War, are deeply involved in the battle on the ground, and the effect they achieve can be devastating.
We were lying out waiting for this craft to come in to pick us up when a German Stuka came over and dive bombing and machine gunning the beaches where we were all laid out on stretchers. That was absolutely terrifying. I was convinced I was going to get it, having got so far with the idea of being in nice clean sheets back in Blighty. I thought, my God, they're going to get me after all.
Napalm is the latest horror in the armory of ground attack. And in 1968, when the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong surrounded the American base at Khe Sanh, aerial bombardment helped to end the siege.
The siege didn't end with some sort of a dramatic battle, but rather with the NVA simply melting away. I'm convinced that he melted away because we used an awesome amount of firepower, particularly air power, on him. He was bombed into submission, in essence. There were more bombs dropped in the immediate area of Khe Sanh during the siege than there had been on Germany in 1943.
Vietnam was an air war for the American Army in another way. It was the first war in which ground troops in large numbers were moved by aircraft directly into the heat of action.
We had to go out and find out where the Viet Cong and NVA were. And the only way to do that was to go out into areas which were heavily foliated and difficult to really see anything without getting right down on top of it. And the idea was once you got right down on top of it, the VC or the VC NVA, they would see you and they would open up on you. As soon as you knew where you were taking fire, you informed the gunship, and then you broke in that direction, and then they rolled in and put down suppressive fire. Then we would send the infantry in to check out to see what we found.
Aircraft have had another vitally important effect upon the nature of modern warfare. They've brought greater mobility to armies, and they've enabled commanders to send specially trained troops far behind enemy lines quickly and with complete surprise. Today, helicopters like this Puma are fairly commonplace in armies, but they're only the latest means of sending troops by air. The idea of the airborne soldier goes back a long way. They jumped into battle in their thousands by parachute. And that's perhaps why, because of their special skills, in most armies, the paras are regarded as a special and elite unit. Soldiers dropping from the skies were a feature of World War II and Korea. Their chief weapon was surprise. Their fighting tradition was formidable, as it had to be, given the odds they faced. And it was the Germans who were the first to commit paratroopers to action en masse.
The parachute soldiers in any army in the world are always a certain elite. They stick together, they kept good discipline, and they had everywhere a wonderful spirit. Our soldiers, our non-commissioned officers, we commanders all together, we are one family. We meet, we were helping each other, are good comrades, are good soldiers, are trained to obey orders. Everybody wants to serve his country. There was a lot of patriotism.
All parachutists begin their training on the ground. They are hardened in careful steps to the shock of the jump, the slipstream, and the landing. They must also prepare for their type of operations with great care. By 1941, the German parachutists had taken part in two great campaigns, in the West and in the Balkans. And then in May of that year, they planned for their riskiest venture, the assault on Crete. Codenamed Mercury, the operation was to be the first attempt of the airborne age to seize a large objective with parachute troops.
As we saw Crete from the air, I was from time to time with these pilots in the cockpit and had a good view. We had quite clear weather. Naturally, everybody wants to show up that he is a proud soldier, but in fact, I wouldn't be honest if I was not admitting that everybody, in fact, was afraid. This was a situation where we started singing even. We admitted that all of us, we were afraid. And the singing in the plane was more or less show business. You give each other courage.
We dropped down like, how shall I say, like a bag of potatoes. Huh? We always had to stand, hold on the door, and jump head first. Spread your arms, keep yourselves in a balance, jump out towards the wing. There you're frightened. Everybody is frightened, you know. But you hope for that bang. Once you're out, you hear that bang on top of you. And that's a relief, now your chute is over.
But a safe landing is not enough to make a parachute jump a success. The individual paratrooper has to begin fighting hard as soon as he hits the ground.
The individual is more important than the unit after landing in the first, say, 20 minutes. You must have good soldiers, weak boys and so, and they don't have an aim and they are no patriots, you can forget them. And there was the most heavy fighting. The biggest fighting was around the airport in Mallemes.
The airport was the key. The Germans finally took it and opened the way for their transport aircraft to bring in reinforcements. Had the British held the airport, they could have isolated the German parachutists and destroyed them at leisure. As it was, supported by stronger forces, the Germans went on to the offensive and victory.
We occupied at least this hill of Mallemes, and then more or less the whole island was in our hand. But we had heavy, heavy losses. And I think the whole German general staff was astonished about these losses. I think the whole airborne philosophy was changed after this experience of Crete.
So heavy were the German losses that Hitler never again risked using his elite airborne divisions in mass drops. The British, who had suffered a humiliation, were driven to the opposite decision, to create airborne forces of their own. The Americans made the same decision. Soon, both armies were training thousands of men to take to the air, leap into space, and wage war on the enemy's own ground.
My first combat jump, of course, was Normandy. In getting ready, we did have a lot of equipment, and the equipment that we carried was divided up among the men because we, say the bazooka men, we could not expect the bazooka man to carry his bazooka and all the rockets that were necessary. Basically, each rifleman carried like 2 bandoliers of ammunition, a full cartridge belt full of ammunition, fragmentation grenades, at least 3 days supply of K-ration food, and about 2 or 3 days supply of D-ration food. We were self-sufficient. We carried our own medical supplies. Plus we had like Hawkins mines, detonating caps, TNT. I carried also a machete and a trench knife. So at the time we were putting our suits on, we had help from the Air Force. They sent men around. We had so much equipment on that we had to lie on the ground in order to fasten the belly band on our reserve chute and have one man stand on our back while another one would fasten the belly band. And then we couldn't get up. We had to have help to get up. I weighed 143 pounds and I was carrying 150 pounds of equipment.
Normandy was the first of 4 great Allied airborne ventures in the reconquest of Western Europe. The second took place in the south of France in August 1944. The third, a heroic failure, was codenamed Market Garden. Its objectives were the bridges over the Meuse and the Rhine at Nijmegen and Arnhem, the notorious Bridge Too Far. The last operation was the successful attempt on the Rhine in March 1945, Operation Varsity.
It was a big operation. It involved the 6th Airborne Division, the British Division, and the 17th United States Airborne Division. It was a part of a very, very big operation. This was the last sort of ditch across the Rhine, and so everybody knew that it was going to be a very big thing.
It was an operation in which gliders were used in the largest numbers ever seen. But gliders were tricky. But they afforded airborne troops the means to bring equipment too heavy to parachute directly to the landing zone. The operation began with a heavy aerial bombardment the night before the crossing. A smokescreen was laid to cover the assault. Then the assault boats set off across the open waterway to make contact with the parachutists and glider infantry who were about to land behind the enemy lines.